Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today we'll be learning how to make a loaf of bread and hamburger buns from the same single recipe. Here are the ingredients you'll need, and I'll give you the instructions as we go along. Here I've started out with 3.5 cups of flour, and I don't sift the flour. If anything, I'll mix it a little with the whisk as I've shown here. I'm adding in the dry ingredients. That's the sugar, salt now, and the yeast. And we'll mix that all together to make sure it's fully incorporated before we add the butter. And then the butter is at room temperature, as stated in the recipe. And then we'll just mix that together as thoroughly as possible. You shouldn't see any more clumps of butter. And it should look about like this. Now we'll add in the water. And as you can see here, I did this to show that I don't like using the whisk in this stage because it just doesn't work for me. I feel like it gets stuck too much, so instead I like to use a fork. This seems for me. When I mix in a figure 8, and that seems to help all the flour incorporate just enough as I go along, because you don't want too much of the flour to start mixing in at once. You'll get clumps that are hard to beat out. So it should look about like this. So from here we'll start to add the remaining flour, but we'll beat in 1 cup at a time until it's no longer sticky and easy to handle. So from here the rings come off, we can't forget that. And I'm going to start kneading the rest of the flour in by hand. Also remember to flour your hands a little bit so they don't stick too much. So now we'll start by lightly flouring the counter so that we can turn the dough off and just start kneading it. At this point, the main goal here is to just knead the dough, but we'll be adding a small amount of flour, trying to add as little as possible. This just keeps it from sticking to our hands or the counter as we work the dough a little to get it to the elastic stage. This takes about 10 minutes of kneading, as you can see, you'll want to use the heels of your hands to push the dough away from you and then fold it back toward yourself. We'll repeat this method until it looks about like this. You can see it's a little bouncy, has some elasticity to it, and that's about where we want it. Now we need to grease this bowl. I've used vegetable oil. You don't want too much, but you do want there to be a decent amount because we need to coat both sides of this dough. So how we do that is we drop it in and then we flip it over and it's fully coated. Now we'll let this sit covered for about 40 minutes to rise or until doubled. Depends on the temperature in your home. So here we are, it's fully risen, and you'll want to punch it down and then flour your work surface again and turn the dough out so that we can split it in half. Now half of this dough is what we're going to make the bread loaf out of, and the other half later on is what we'll make the hamburger buns with. So flouring it a little bit, we'll start to shape it by hand, and then you'll just continue on with the dough roller until it is 9 inches by 18 inches. Now starting from the short end, we'll just start to tightly roll it, just the same as you would do a cinnamon roll. I like to lift and pull just a little bit to make sure that it's rolling up just as tightly as possible without stretching it too much. Then we'll just seal this together by pinching the dough all the way across. And this will be the bottom of your loaf, so you want to make sure that this part is facing down for our next step. Now for this next step, we'll be smashing down and folding under the ends. I'll use a pan to measure exactly where I need to fold it. I'll just press it down here and flatten it out to the end. Just a double check. And then we'll proceed to fold these under. And just like that. And we can't forget to grease the loaf pan. I'm just using vegetable oil again. Now, whether you decide to pinch these ends down as I'm doing here is up to you. It's not a terribly crucial process, but I like to do it because it makes for a prettier, more even loaf. If your dough is too dry, sometimes it won't stick if you don't pinch it, and that'll show in the finished loaf. So we'll just leave it here and cover it again and allow it to rise until doubled. Now while that's rising, we'll get started with the hamburger buns. I've lightly dusted a baking sheet with cornmeal. That's optional. If you don't want to do this, then you can grease the sheet or just flour it, but you will need to do one of those to ensure that this doesn't stick. Now here I'm just going to try to shape it into a bit of a circle, cut it into quarters, and with each quarter I'm flouring it just a little more and we'll start shaping it into the bun. I like to curl the sides over just a little bit, and I'll show you from under basically what I'm doing. I go from the top, but this is just to show you what's happening on the bottom. Just keep rotating until it's all tucked in. I like to give it a little bit of a twirl, and then I'll pinch in the bottom there. And that's about it, and you'll do these for all the rest of them. And we'll bake these for about 20 minutes or until it feels hollow. Now straight out of the oven we want to butter the bread. I like to butter it all the way around, I think it helps. And here you are. Now after letting it cool for about 5 to 10 minutes, you can cut it if you like. To do this, you'll want to make sure you put down the least amount of pressure possible as you saw through. And there we are, a beautiful loaf of homemade bread.